Welcome to Redtastic. Story 1. My 20 male's mom has 6 different kids, all from different fathers. I'm the oldest and I live with my dad. Due to the legal system being flawed over here, she got full custody even though my dad was clearly a better fit. So I lived with my mom until I was 18 and finally moved in with my dad. She was on baby number 4 by the time I left home, and my oldest sibling was 7. I'm living with my dad and life is great. He got married to a lovely woman and my brother, 28 male, is awesome. I have a new sister-in-law, 31 female, nephew 8 male, and my longtime girlfriend, 19, also lives with us. My dad was able to start a little company when he met my now stepmom and pretty much hit gold. My mom was never happy about the fact that I moved out, mostly because without me she doesn't have free childcare. I also feel like she's jealous. She called me up yesterday. To spare details, she started talking about how she and my siblings miss me, and I owe it to her to move back and help her. I don't know why, but I snapped. You have an open door policy between your legs, and as a result, you keep having different kids from different fathers. I lived with you because the legal system was forcing me to, and you didn't treat me like a son. You treated me like your free baby caretaker. Now you expect me to give up this blessed fortunate life just to go and live in a shitty moldy apartment and take care of 5 kids while you go out and keep getting effed by strangers, raw. Goodbye, Jane. Fake name. I don't know what came over me. That was the first time I had ever spoken to her or anybody like that. I told the family. They weren't exactly thrilled about it, but they weren't mad at me. The general consensus was that it was my right to live wherever I want, and it's my right to tell my mom how I feel. But I'm basically kicking somebody while they're already down, and I could have chosen much nicer words to decline my mom. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I took a 1-hour power nap due to the fact that I've been up for 2 days. I came back to see that this absolutely blew up. I appreciate the feedback. The commentary has some people saying that I'm not the a-hole, I'm an a-hole, and that everyone sucks here. The consensus of all the comments is that yes, my words were very harsh and that makes me an ass, but I am a justified ass. A friend of mine who is also on Reddit was able to recognize who wrote this post based on my writing style and the context of the situation. We had a long talk, and I had a long talk with my girlfriend and family. I'm going no contact with my mother. I feel very sorry for my younger siblings. They shouldn't have to suffer in this world just because their fathers are deadbeats and their mother is making very questionable and plain wrong choices in life, but they are not my responsibility. Edit 2. It seems as though some people in the comments are pissy because I was slang shaming, and people in DMs are ready to tear my head off. A woman is free to have as much sex as she wants. My mother is a grown adult, and even though I phrased it this way, I'm not shaming her for having a lot of sex. I'm shaming her because the amount of sex she has keeps resulting in children that she does not take any responsibility for and falls on me. I have no problem with you having a lot of sex, but when all the sex you have resulted in me having to give up my teenage years to act as a father to kids that aren't even mine, that's when I have a big problem. Yes, you could have phrased your rejection a bit better, OP, but I totally understand why you lashed out and said what you said. Your mom was wrong for how she treated you and parentified you. It sucks that she's probably doing that to your older siblings right now. Those kids didn't ask for this, but your mom gave birth to all of them anyway, while being fully aware that she couldn't take care of them the way they deserve to be taken care of. She's an a-hole for this. You have finally escaped that life and you seem happy, but please do look into ways to help your other siblings. They deserve a good family life too. Now for some comments. Everyone sucks here. I agree with everyone who is saying that she was using you, but I definitely think you acted like an a-hole. There were better and more mature ways of expressing your emotions. I don't know if you have brought up your issues to her in the past, but if this is the first time she's heard this from you, then I think it was the wrong way of going about it. I'm not saying you need to maintain a relationship with your mother, But I do think being kind in life is a virtue. Holding on to these emotions is only going to hold you back. I hate parents who do this too. If you're going to have kids, it's your freaking job to care for them. I used to babysit for a family who had made their 2 older girls into mini parents to teach them that having kids is a big responsibility, so they don't have kids young. These 7 and 11-year-old girls were responsible for literally all of the care involved for their 2 toddler sisters. It was really sad to see how they had no childhood, and I couldn't work with them anymore. OP, I'm sure your mother is leaving your siblings alone with whoever is the next oldest. The mention of mold in the apartment implies there is a neglectful environment in other ways too. You should call CPS. Not the a-hole. Reality bites sometimes. Look, your mom doesn't seem to understand how much damage she was doing to you. She can only see how her life has changed. You missed out on so many things because you were babysitting your younger siblings. You were a kid and not the parent. Your mom needs to get her act together and go after the assaulted fathers for assistance. If she doesn't know who fathers are, she can get aid. It's your time to blossom. Figure out what you want to do with your life. It sounds like your dad and stepmom will help. Go no contact with your mom because she's a toxic leech. You may want to consider therapy to help you deal with garbage your mom put you through. Story 2. My ex and I have 4 boys, married at 21. Our youngest was the surprise baby and is 5 years younger than the next youngest kid. He has always tried to compete with his older brothers who excelled in sports and school, but couldn't because he was smaller and had a learning disability, so he has a bit of an inferior complex, I think. He was the hardest to raise. When he was 16, his mom and I fell in love with other people and divorced. She and I are friends and we see each other often. There are no hard feelings. Our son had no plans after high school except to pursue his art. My ex and I agreed to allow him to take a gap year and he could stay at either of our houses. But then it's either working or college. After that year, he decided to bum off my ex's parents. He was completely estranged from us during that year. We suspected he was getting into drugs and convinced them to kick him out. He lived in a van for 6 months. We helped him get a minimum wage job, and he currently lives with his mom and a new husband. My son is almost 21. All of a sudden, my son announces he's getting married to some girl he met. She is a bigger train wreck than he is. I asked if she was pregnant, and my son said no, but they want to have kids. My other 3 sons married and started families early, but they were prepared and mature enough. They also support their own families. My son is not ready for this move. My ex is allowing them both to live with her mainly because my son's girlfriend has no family and nowhere to go. She doesn't support their getting married but won't stop it. My son and this girl cannot afford a wedding, so they asked to have one on my beach properties. I refused and I am public enemy number 1. For the first time in years, I am fighting with my ex over it. She thinks we should just let him crash on their own so he doesn't blame anyone but himself. Our other sons think this whole thing is a joke. Edit. Everyone, including my son, is aware that he has an issue with alcohol. Because of this, his mom doesn't allow alcohol in her house. When my son talked about his wedding plans, he wanted to have tons of alcohol. This shows how immature he is. And of course, they want to do the whole wedding registry, cash only, even though they don't pay rent at his mom's place. I have no regrets about the art stuff. He met some rich art kids who basically made their living from selling their art to their rich mommy and daddy. Our family has money too, and he thought he could just do that. For example, he wanted me to buy a painting he did of a toad. I told him I would buy it for $40. He wanted $500 cash. You're not the a-hole for refusing to host your son's wedding, OP, especially if you believe it's a bad idea. And to be honest, it sounds like it is. Your son is young, broke, and he doesn't have any plans about what to do when he's married, except maybe to continue to mooch off of his parents. Except now, he won't be just him anymore. And he also has a free card to have babies, which he says he totally wants. Yeah, you sound a bit disappointed when talking about your son, and you seem proud of the other ones, which can be seen as favoritism. But honestly, you're not obligated to pay for anything. If your son wants a wedding, he should try being able to afford it first. Now for some comments. Gonna go with the unpopular, not the a-hole on this one. Sounds like you and your ex did your best to help your son without being taken advantage of. Just because you're a parent doesn't mean you need to martyr yourself for a child that's been making poor choices. You don't have to host a wedding you don't approve of, but you should probably go to it to show that you love your son. Not the a-hole. It's incredibly hard to watch someone you love making huge mistakes, and it's really tempting to cave into loved ones' demands. But if you're sure this is a disaster waiting to happen, it's not the loving thing to do to support it, especially considering your son's age. However, you have to accept that this will damage that relationship further, if that's possible, and every one of these wedges makes it harder to reconcile in the future. Now wait a damned minute. There is supporting someone and then there is supporting someone. OP's son is 21, not 16. He got to live off his folks and take a gap year with the understanding that it's then college or work. He wanted to work on his art. Albeit a noble pursuit, has anyone considered that, quite obviously, his art isn't good enough to support him? He then ran to his grandparents to live off of them. He wants a wedding he can't afford. And then what? He and his now wife can continue living off of mommy? OP, you're not the a-hole for expecting your son to be a functioning adult. Story 3. Today was our Thanksgiving dinner, and I come from a pretty secular family. My family, my wife, daughter, myself, we're hosting it for our family of some 25 people. My sister has a son, my nephew, who is 14. I mentioned we come from a secular family because none of us really practice it or go to church. But we do say prayers before meals and we'll do baptism, communions, confirmations, etc. It's kind of what every Italian family does. Do I believe in God? Not really, but I'll still say prayers. My nephew is at that stage where he's beginning to question religion, which I think is great. It's perfectly normal to be skeptical and question authority. If anything, it lets him learn more about his culture and other cultures and become a more well-rounded human because of it. Today, my daughter was about to say prayers before our meal when my nephew gave an exasperated which I took as cue as maybe he wanted to say prayer. So I asked if he would do it and he made some big sarcastic speech about how God isn't real, blah blah blah. I considered this disrespectful because a prayer means nothing but tradition. The least he could do is pretend to partake in it, give it at least the tiniest modicum of effort. Not only that, but some of our family who does take our faith a little more seriously than others could be offended. I told him, my 14-year-old nephew, he can either say a proper prayer or he will not eat. He hemmed and hawed for a good 3 or 4 minutes before finally giving in and saying at least a respectable prayer. My sister pulled me aside later that night and said I went overboard, but otherwise agreed with my sentiment. Even if we have no faith at all and it was just a little pre-meal speech of thankfulness, the least he could do was give a tiny shit and be a good person and do it. But he chose to be an a-hole about it. Was I the a-hole or was I in the right? Now for some comments. You're the a-hole. No one has to say a prayer if they don't want to. And it's not even your kid, so you overstepped. In my opinion, the correct teaching moment would have been to tell him that he doesn't need to pray, but please be courteous as the rest of the family does. Everyone sucks here. Nephew shouldn't have gone that way about it. It's still important to respect other people's beliefs even if they are not shared by you. On the other hand, you shouldn't have forced him to say a prayer. It's more of a gray area for me. On one hand, you're teaching him to at least respect the tradition even if you don't practice it, but also he's not your kid, and it's not exactly your responsibility. You're the a-hole, and don't lump all us Italians together and use our culture to justify your shitty behavior. We value tradition for sure, but we value family more. Even though my family believes in religious freedom and expression, our tables get heated sometimes, but we never sacrifice family for tradition. You violated that by exerting your authority for the sake of nothing but your pride and ego. You had a teachable moment where you could have related to the kid, but instead you taught him that at his family table he's a burden and will be punished unless he falls in line. Shame on you.